All right, welcome. Haven't been live in a while, but I'm excited to get started. This is actually my preparation for um, an interview that I'll be doing in a little over an hour. But until then, I'm happy to be speaking with you. I'm especially happy, yes, because I've been trying to write, but it's um, maybe even a better format for me to make these videos where I am able to sort of share screen. Helps me stay a bit grounded in terms of being able to read about the things that I'm referencing, pull things up, which, yeah, hopefully you will agree. Anyways, um, going off the title of the video, I'm here to talk about theoretical violence. Um, that's not exactly what the interview that I'm going to be doing is about. That interview is going to be related to what to say, language, technology, apocalypse, war. It's with Rosalind Mitchell, who I have appeared with before. This is also a good place I can talk about. I think I'll be appearing um, on the Consistent Life Network, um, which I have some reservations about, but this is the only. Well, I don't know. I enjoyed speaking with Rosalind as well personally. But also, like, this is the only people who are asking to interview me. So, I mean, what am I going to say that I don't want to be interviewed? So, my reservations are about the fact that they, I don't know, they advocate the pro life position. So, basically, they get very judgmental or, um, yeah, I mean, they get judgmental about people having abortions. I basically don't agree with that. Um, I would agree, though, for example, like if somebody gets an abortion, they wish they didn't get one. That is a justice issue and everything like that. But basically, in a world where resources are so scarce, where things are so fraught, I feel like pressuring somebody to get into this very intense situation, um, yeah, like isn't appropriate. So I could see in a world, I could see, in 10 years, like there is no more abortion, but I think it could be a world that sort of quote unquote feminists or whatever might also enjoy. So anyways, it's not because, pregnancies can't be terminated, but people will continue to have greater control and intention over their pregnancy, which I guess it loops back around. This is a related question, to theoretical violence. Um, yeah, abortion. I mean, so I guess I'm thinking about that in two senses. The first sense is the sense in which we're all transsexual. Um, I think this is very important, or like that's the way people would say, we all have aspects of the masculine and feminine within us. Even transsexual is maybe a bit too much. Because for me, the question would still be, well, why associate this with masculinity, femininity, or with biological sex? So I think in that, yeah, on the ultimate spiritual level, I think I'm sort of committed to the notion that those concepts are not absolute. So that in our soul, I mean, this is getting into a bunch of very interesting, philosophical topics, many of which are super fraught, and everybody who I don't know. Anyways, but so yeah, that our souls, basically don't have sex. And But anyway, this is a term. This is sexual reproduction is a lens through which we think of things. I think that there's no question about that, and I think it also makes sense given the sort of bodies, I guess, and overall story of sexual reproduction on the whole planet, that we find ourselves in. But anyway, in that sense, abortion, you could think about somebody being demoralized, or even more than demoralized, sort of really dismissed. So basically, what is inside of them, which could be growing out, is not able to. So I would be inclined to look at that through the lens of abortion. which I think does tie into something like Consistent Life. Again, Consistent Life Network. I don't know. I've never really, I mean, I was on a radio station. And for that radio station, I could say something like, it's probably like the Pacifica Network. I don't know. Like, I don't know who is associated with that radio station. I don't know, but I appreciated the chance to be on the air, I suppose. Oh, my other reservation with the Consistent Life Network, I saw, maybe I can just find it here. They had like a blurb where they're getting praised by, oh, this is where I need to be sharing my screen, but that's okay. We can figure this out. Yeah. I wonder if it was here. Or maybe it was on the person's website who is considered the leader of this or something. But they had something by Sebastian Gorka. Sebastian Gorka was saying like, "Oh, this is so great." I'm not sure. So anyway, I won't be able to find that. I'm going to get bogged down in that. Also, I have to remember because it shares like one tab at a time, not the whole screen. Anyways, where were we going with this? Yeah, that's my other reservation. It's obviously, a pro-life. I don't know. So in our world of, Christianity and politics and everything, yeah. I don't know exactly what to say. Basically, like my appearing on this network, it's interesting because it does tie into some of the topics that I think are relevant for what we would actually be set up to talk about, which is like the notion that everything is part of God's plan, and that actually came up recently. It's one of the reasons why I'm excited. Okay, so now I do this. Okay. Basically, there was one. There was one YouTube video that I was excited about recently, which was where Nick Land was reacting to being on Tucker Carlson. I forget why this was coming up. Oh, maybe I remember. It's this video. Nick Land responds to Tucker Carlson. So, no. So basically, one of the things that Nick Land mentions in this video, also the notion that there's like Satan or something, like wills bad but does good. That's apparently a line from Faust. And I also was doing some research into Mein Kampf yesterday, and I noticed that Hitler also uses that passage. So obviously that makes this a fraught nexus. But I mean, we should have no illusions, right, about what it is that we're dealing with. It's like, yes, we're going to have to talk about Nazism and all sorts of things, right? The most controversial things in the world. But it's not just Nazism. It's also basically the places where we disagree about what constitutes harm, where like one person would say, "Oh, I just want what's best for you," and the other person says, "Well, that's not what I'm interested in. Like you're basically controlling. You're like harming me." But this sort of disagreement, like that's the kind of thing that people will come to blows over. That's like what we fight over all the time. At the macro level of your nuclear war, your institutional, the technology, the sorts of digital infrastructure, which is recording, sucking up this video right now, and in which my words are becoming part of the data set. Where's I going with that? Not sure. But anyway, I'm supposed to be talking about theoretical violence. So I was sort of doing it, as I was saying, abortion is related to something like our interpersonal relationships, which gets to what I was just talking about, where it's basically like, I want to sit here and like, I would like to connect with you about a movie I just watched that I thought was cool, and I don't need to talk your ear off about, I'm not trying to like monopolize the conversation, but I'd like to tell you a little bit about it, and then maybe we can have a good conversation. But, you aren't having it, right? Like you're insisting on talking about, I guess what I would say is I notice a lot people just want to like be negative. So it's like you're talking about something that we don't have to be talking about, like in order to be able to express yourself about how like something is bad. So I think it would be good to like pick something arbitrary, which is like you wouldn't even really need to talk about it. It's like, yeah, like a window was smudged, right? And it's like that could be a big deal or it's not a big deal, but it's like, nobody's coming to like get mad at you. So it's like you were just really upset about this smudged window, and I'm sitting here trying to connect with you about art or whatever. And you can't stop talking about, like, you are inhibiting, you are preventing, right? You're preventing the birth. That's why I'm saying it's like it relates to abortion. It's like you're aborting the conversation. You're killing the possibility for the conversation that we could be having by seizing on, a negative thing. It's also funny though, because you kind of notice, like, when you start to pay attention to this and start to try and discuss it, that you can be doing it while you are talking about it, and it relates really interestingly, I think, to yeah, I guess the whole question of sin, I suppose, because it's like you're sitting here trying to help, like, what actually exists is like a found material. So like its destiny actually isn't written yet. Yeah. So like everything is part of God's plan, but you have to, like, as you go along, you are basically establishing why. But it's also, anyways, I'm really getting off the topic of theoretical violence here, but I'm trying to explain that I'm doing theoretical violence to the term of abortion itself. So basically, I should be going over to show you some of these passages that involve theoretical violence. This is a term that comes from Jean Baudrillard. But so quickly flesh out my my thing though. So it was abortion in terms of like thinking about when we kill off potential, when we kill the chance for life, that we're also like committing abortion. And in the larger sense, the idea that war could kill everybody, which relates to Ben Zweibelson in this reconceptualizing war, chapter 2, that I posted, that Dr. Zweibelson shared with me, was so kind to share with me, I should say. In this, there's a lot of talk about, I don't know if apocalyptic, religious apocalypse in conversation with war, and also just more broadly the eschatological war frame as described by Anatole Rappaport, which can actually be more secular or religious, but basically refers to violence or war playing a role in a sea change. It's also interesting because Dr. Zweibelson has been active writing about something they call techno-eschatology as well. Yeah, they've been posting a lot. I'm behind. I need to be posting more. Anyways, so they've been talking about techno-eschatology. I know I can search for what I want to find because it involves this word free world. Yeah, this is the kind of thing, it's funny. If I were to appear with Ben Zweibelson, I would just be more excited than I am with the consistent life network. Although, yeah, they're both interesting and fraught for the same reason. But maybe it's like everything is, everything has, some parts that I don't know, I would say are getting in the way, but for other people, like, that would be the main part, and things that I like are things that they think are getting in the way. But yeah, I guess it's because I rate Dr. Zweibelson as like being pretty cool, just for like being. I don't know if they're technically a military official, but having something to do with the military so much, and like for example, in this discussing like the idea of solving the problem of war. And this I feel like is actually a very weighty sentence where it's like, I aspire to such a future too, if only out of increasing apprehension at the unfolding future possibilities of in conflict already facing our species. It's like, I mean, this clause is basically what you call Zeitgeist Weltschmerz. Or the other term that I've come up with is the permanent hardcore Dachau highway nihilist blues. So those are both referenced in the thumbnail for this video. But I mean, this is very little. This is like one sentence. This is like paying lip service to the idea of like, Donald Trump or Pete Hegseth or whatever, we're doing similar things. We're like, well, we don't want to fight war, but if we do have to fight war, like we're going to kill everybody. Which like, from a non-condemnatory point of view, like I can understand why people would say that. Yeah, I'm just trying to like turn attention more toward, well, we need to be doing this thing of solving the problem of war. I think it does involve more than just like, asking somebody else to do something, which has something to do with theoretical violence. But so basically, I wanted to sketch out the thing where, the matter of abortion is obviously important in its own right, but read as a poetic image, I think it can also be applied to the sense in which we are continually being born, basically. And so this idea that, what is coming out of us can also be cut off or like aborted, right? So you'd compare that to the idea of like mission abort. Yeah. And so I think that's about recognizing like a gravity in terms of like how we use our attention, like the possibilities we choose to explore and allow, and what we sort of cut off with everything that we do, really. And then, but what I wanted to share from this tab was where Dr. Zweibelson was talking about the techno-eschatological war philosophy may be the necessary organizing logic. So then, Dr. Zweibelson goes on to say, for the free world, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I don't know what you're talking about. But I mean, Ben Zweibelson like works for the military of the quote unquote United States of America. I already have a whole article talking about like, well, yeah, like, Dr. Zweibelson can't actually tell you what they think about the social ontology of war or conflict or whatever that's supposed to be, because like the term, like the way of talking about it is so politicized. It's part of the war, right? Like so I'd say there's not really a state, but it would be more correct to say there's a certain kind of state of conflict, even diffuse and uneven. What am I trying to say? Within which, right, within that state of conflict, the idea of projecting this idea of the state and, and that we are the good state and they have the bad state and we are the free world and they are authoritarian and so forth. For example, like I feel the same way about, what other quote unquote countries talk about, where it's like, oh, well, America is imperialist and Russia isn't, or whatever. Like my point is not that, oh, all the nations are bad. It's more so that like we need to interrogate this idea of nation, which is also circling back into this concept of theoretical violence, which I'm still yet to get to. But I think it's very interesting, basically, that Dr. Zweibelson is saying like we may this eschatological war philosophy may be necessary, and organizing logic also pretty cool. Or at least what I'm trying to say is like a very intense reference, because logic goes with logos. So this is very vague because there are many different kinds of techno-eschatological war philosophy. This is also, again, built off Dr. Zweibelson's reading of Anatole Rappaport, So there's like a very particular way that this is being meant, but still, like eschatological is basically being open to this idea that there could be a big sea change. It could be good or bad, right? It could be that you're gonna kill all your enemies, um, and that like everybody's going to die, or it could be just that social conditions are changed. They could be changed for the better. But right now, it appears, right, that we are sinking into just getting mad at each other and being torn apart and fighting forever. So the change could basically be that comes to a head. It still like comes to its conclusion. We all die or whatever. Or it could be that there's some sort of comes to, just that dynamic, I guess, of conflict. So theoretical violence is a term that comes up in Symbolic Exchange and Death by Jean Baudrillard. Let's see if I can get into here. Okay, so the first two times this term appears, they're both in the preface to Symbolic Exchange and Death. The preface to Symbolic Exchange and Death, I mean, this is just for like people who, I don't know. Like, I don't think any text is something you have to be exposed to. It's kind of like when people say, oh my God, you haven't seen Star Wars or something. It's like, in a way, I can see why people react that way because they take it so for granted that, this is an important piece of media or media. I don't know. It's an important thing, right? And it structures something maybe even more than we understand about our own awareness. Like, oh yeah, I mean, Pulp Fiction. Like, you haven't seen Pulp Fiction. How am I supposed to like talk to you about what I mean by Tarantino-esque or whatever if you haven't seen Pulp Fiction? Anyways, people obviously also do that with writing. There's a lot that I have not read. It's always nice to be exposed to new things, but I also think it's important that we all get a chance to speak our piece regardless of what we've been exposed to so far. And I think this idea of like, oh, well, somebody else said this before, it can often be like it can also often be used to cheapen somebody's perspective, like because you haven't been exposed to something yet, or like, you're reinventing the wheel. I'm basically very pro reinventing the wheel. It's just like we need to go through like our own discursive processes. So anyway, what I was trying to say was, for me, the preface of Symbolic Exchange and Death is like a really powerful piece of writing. It's pretty short, like 6 or 7 pages or something like that. But so like, I think that, if you, for example, if you wanted to make a like a chat bot version of Baudrillard, I think hyper training and like being clear about this part would be really good because there's so many cool aspects to it. And this theoretical violence plays some role in that. So here in the preface to Symbolic Exchange and Death, we can say symbolic exchange is no longer the organizing principle of modern society. This sentence is interesting because we don't necessarily have to agree with that, even from a Baudrillardian point of view. But then that would just also be the extent to which Baudrillard perhaps like changed his mind. And this is something I've talked about before. It might be in Carnival and Cannibal, which I don't think this PDF is searchable, which is a tough thing about it. But basically, there's a part of this text where Baudrillard is saying that global power may remain a symbolic system, and that this has something to do with like a revision of their thinking. So the very first sentence of Symbolic Exchange and Death is sort of saying that there's something called like the system, and the problem with the system is that it is like expelling symbolic exchange. And so like our goal or something is to bring back symbolic exchange. But what's really interesting about this last part is where It's saying, if global power is a symbolic power, then maybe it's not correct to say that, symbolic exchange, again, like the question of what that means is open. But so symbolic exchange, perhaps, I don't even say it is the governing logic, but this gets back into, I wish I could just jump over, but I'm still trying to find, I think it might be at the end of the first paragraph or the first essay. So I just got to find that. Right. So here, to contemplate the idea that global power, yada, 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 may nevertheless constitute a power of defiance, a power of response to the challenge from the other world, that is to say, ultimately a symbolic power, means for me a drastic revision, a casting into the balance of what I've always thought. So yeah, I mean, for me, like, I don't see a lot of other people like really foreground this passage, but for me, this is one of the most important passages of Baudrillard, because this is a sort of meta commentary on everything that came before, right? Now, as usual, Baudrillard is not, definitive. Baudrillard is not here saying that, like, I throw away everything that I thought before. But at the same time, like, Baudrillard wouldn't say that, even if, I don't know, or like, depending on, you're reading it, and in a way, you're sort of projecting Baudrillard as a character. Like, this is what Baudrillard would say, or whatever. Which is a sort of like mystique, authorial mystique that Baudrillard has been building up for decades at this point by writing in this hyper stylized way. Like, anyway, so let's see, what am I trying to say here? So yeah, Baudrillard is not coming out and saying, like, I am throwing away everything I said before, but it's at least being open to it, a drastic revision to contemplate, even to contemplate the idea is a drastic revision. So anyway, now we're going back over here. Basically, even though I'd say overall in Baudrillard, you definitely have, what am I trying to say here? For me, it's more about like seizing on different pieces. So in a way, it's not even so much about like, oh, Baudrillard was correct, so much as like Baudrillard has some really good lines. There's other aspects to it where it's like, I don't know. Anyways, but overall, I think the theory about, symbolic exchange and the system and so on and so forth, it still is important. That still is what we're talking about. Because, for example, if we're talking about the question of sin, and is there sin, and is there evil, or even be outside of a theological reading, is there a crime, or is somebody doing something, right, that we think should be stopped, or, for example, coming back to this question of solving war and kinetic violence, it's like people are dropping bombs. It's like, okay, well, is there something wrong with that? Should that stop? Basically what is, how do you articulate it metaphysically? Because it's sort of like there's something, there are certain outcomes which would be better. So if you kill somebody, they can never write a book. They can never, there's all sorts of stuff, it's not even just about what we can get out of people, but like they care, right? They wanted to have a nice life and you like ruined their life or you killed them. And so there, I guess you'd say for different people, there's different people that we care about, or we think of first, oh, the innocent, children being killed. It's like, okay, but I mean, the warriors, the people who are doing the killing and fighting, like they also might want to, whatever, write a book or something like that. And then depending on who's doing the fighting, right? Oh, well, I mean, the terrorists, it's so hard to like feel bad for them. It's like, why would you do that? But then from, the point of view of the people who are, fighting or whatever, it's like, oh, well, I mean, the official powers, the people who have all the money or who have like a bunch of ability to, blanket the media and be like, well, of course, like we're good, the states, in other words, that like they're also, I would say, committing atrocities or something. So it's relevant to this question of dealing with war, and basically the question of how are we responding to this, because you have different people who are trying to kill each other, or different people who don't see each other as, I don't know what you'd say, like not socially useful. Although it's interesting how that term has implications for like functionalism as a social paradigm that Ben Zweibelson talks about. But like overall, like we would be part of an ecosystem. It's both a discursive ecosystem as well as a regular biological ecosystem, in the sense that like somebody could get sick, and now we are getting their sickness, or somebody has bad ideas and they're talking about them and they're infecting other people with their bad ideas. So we can obviously be really concerned about that. Oh shoot. But I think that it's a helpful line of inquiry, basically, to be asking like what's going on here beyond just the way any particular actor sees it, because everybody in a situation could be agreed that it is a zero-sum situation, and yet the situation could still not be a zero-sum situation. So even if everybody is convinced that we're in a fight to the death of some sort, like it doesn't mean that we're actually in a fight to the death. Anyway, how that relates to symbolic exchange and the organizing principle was basically like, I think it's very related to Christian narratives or something of sin, like, oh, the world is fallen, and things like this. I think that the narrative that, oh, well, symbolic exchange was important, but now it's gone, right? That the system or whatever. Yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, so I think this is very symptomatic. Like the system appears 174 times in this book. So like the work that's supposed to be doing, I think it is very similar to, like Satan. It's like the thing where the good thing is missing. And the good thing, in a sense, is symbolic exchange. Even though like symbolic exchange is really more like sublime. Like it's good and evil together. But is still like raw. One way that I would be thinking to talk about this is in the notion of the non-Euclidean and the Newtonian, which is something that Ben Zweibelson talks about. So let's see. We have the PDF for Beyond the Pale here. It wasn't the system. What was I talking about here? Oh, right, the Newtonian idea. There's even a really funny article called Breaking the Newtonian Fetish. So, fetish is, fetish, a spicy word, but so is breaking. Anyways, so yeah, Ben Zweibelson talks about this like Newtonian world, which is based off of like reductionism, positivism, technical rationalism, and systematic logic. And so Ben Zweibelson is relating this to pseudoscience, right? But I would say that this sort of Newtonian style is very much sort of the standard modern, I guess you could say, worldview, and not even that people who like think that they're anti-modern. I don't know. It is in a sense like this is like what people are talking about if they're like, oh, like we've lost enchantment or whatever. But on the other hand, it's what I'm also saying is that it's not as easy as just saying, well, I'm against this. I disagree with this operating logic, and therefore I'm not part of it. So it requires more than denouncing something. You have to really like take on this the challenge, I guess, of surpassing Newtonianism, or just like it reminds me of a phrase that Carl Schmitt uses, which is classical concepts. So basically, like the classic way we think about this, like, oh yeah, there's different countries, like the way we're like, oh, Spain went to war with France, and we're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like we think that's telling us something, because it's like, oh yeah, well there's a Spain and there's a France, or it's like oh so and so, like, oh well they're crazy. The way we think about, we think we understand that in terms of like, oh yeah, like there's different people and like this person is unbalanced, and like that might be like a way that we operate, the same way that I might get hauled off to jail any one of these days, and it's like, well, who is imprisoning me? And the answer will resound, right? The United States of America is imprisoning you. But I would be like, well, I don't see the United States of America. Like, what I see is cell walls. I see you are here and you're saying that you are an agent of the United States of America, but I don't have to believe that in order to get dragged to jail. So I think, yeah. So this is just sort of referencing what I was saying before. So Euclidean is obviously like a style of geometry. Newtonian is a matter of physics. So it is like a way of imagining what's going on in the world in terms of dimensions and objects moving in time and space. So what I'm basically saying is that symbolic exchange. How did I get off of? Oh, I guess I was, I changed my topic. But symbolic exchange is not of that order. So I think that, what was I trying to say? Symbolic exchange is not of that order, like of the Newtonian. Yeah, it's just not, it's not straightforward and linear, I suppose you could say, in that sense. But on the other hand, there's basically the question of, how could even the idea of the linear or the reality or the Newtonian arise? So, which is basically to say that, the Newtonian model of physics, right, we would now say is incomplete or something. It doesn't get into the kind of stuff that Einstein was talking about with, relativity and whatever. But, if we're going to sit here, I don't know if we'd say we're Platonists, but, we're going to sit here and believe in reality, right? So, like, actually, Einstein's relativity, or whatever the dynamics that's describing, was operating when Newton created Newtonian physics. So it was already an Einsteinian world, and I'm sure Einstein has been iterated on as well. But so ultimately, even if you don't know that quantum mechanics exists, for example, this is to use a different example from physics, quantum mechanics was still happening. So even if we are recognizing some more regular or seemingly linear relationships in the world, like the governing dynamics which are allowing for those things to appear to us, are still already complex and non-Newtonian, non-Euclidean. And basically what I'm saying is of the order of symbolic exchange. So when Baudrillard is coming back over here and talking about how global power is a symbolic power, there's also another part. Yeah. I mean, this is related. Like, so all events take on another meaning, because basically there's another part probably of this book where it talks about how like our techno universe takes on a new meaning. And things take on like a high symbolic importance. And so that's very much the same question here of like, well, are we dealing with, a place of symbolic exchange or not? So in this sense, like you could imagine a world where it's like there's the playing at the idea, that we're stamping something out, like sentimentality or something, like, well, you shouldn't marry for love, like you should marry for money, or like everything's about money, so it's like, are you going to take the deal or whatever, and so there's the conceit, right, that it's like, oh, well, this isn't personal, or like, leave your personal feelings out of it because, money or something. But the thing is, right, it's still about your feelings. It's just that, your feelings are being translated into the money or whatever it is. So it's like there's a whole universe where the conceit of something is, you'd say, disavowed on the conscious level. Like we're all going to sit here and talk about how we're not racist, even though we all know that we are racist. Or what else? It's like you're going to sit here and it's a funeral, and somebody says something which just people think is funny, but it's like you don't want to laugh. You don't want to laugh because like that's not the right time, because it's a funeral. But the problem, or not the problem, but it just is the case that humor can I don't know, cut through grief, or like also be present there. And so it's not just up to us in terms of like our willpower or something, like what we want to choose to acknowledge, or what we overtly say. So that what is unspoken can, I don't know if you'd say it, contradict, like, yeah, what is spoken. So that's related here because it's related to this whole question of, like, is the system, non-symbolic, or like, is it, what's wrong with the system or something like this? Which, is obviously a very popular discourse. Anyways, that's not the part that I'm trying to talk about. But basically, obviously we have Karl Marx being discussed here in the beginning, which makes sense because this book is coming shortly after, The Mirror of Production, which is one of Baudrillard's books talking about why they disagree with like Karl Marx, but they came out of this tradition. So like going from Marxist to post-Marxist is a big aspect of Baudrillard's intellectual trajectory, I guess you could say. Yeah, and I think that is very important. Basically grappling with the Marx question, and in a way being sympathetic to it. I think in many ways Baudrillard is sympathetic to. It's interesting what you'd say, because Baudrillard criticizes so many specific aspects of like the whole idea of liberation and so on. But I think overall Baudrillard wants, something like everybody to be a poet. Baudrillard wants everybody to flourish and like be doing cool stuff. It's just like a lot of the ways that we conceptualize those things can be cognitively rigid in a way that Baudrillard's going to disagree with. But anyway, like I think overall Baudrillard is still open, to this idea of like trying to be nice and share and all of this sort of thing. But the task, right, of confronting the established ideas and the constant return of all the old ideas and everything, and just having to answer all of this, you might call it like a cultural question or something, or just a narrative, PR question. But this is in a way really like the important part, right? Anyways, so there's obviously a lot to that. But I'm just noting, Marx comes up here, but it relates to the question of theoretical violence, because in the second paragraph, or maybe the second third, so like we get to this idea of turning an author against themselves. So that you're going to use Freud against Freud, or you're going to turn Mauss, this is Marcel Mauss, against Mauss. Saussure, and then of course we can be thinking, Marx against Marx. So yeah, already, and just also noting, Freud was just mentioned, but the law of the father. So I mean, we're very much talking about Marxism and psychoanalysis, and trying, and also linguistics, right, with Saussure, and basically endeavoring to go beyond the limitations of these discourses as they are presently constituted. And so theoretical violence is mentioned here. At the price of paradox and theoretical violence, we witness that the three hypotheses describe in their own respective fields a functional principle, sovereignly outside and antagonistic to our economic reality principle. So this is actually interesting. I have neglected to highlight the word functional here, but that is important. Basically, because functionalist is like one of the ways of describing social paradigms for Ben Zweibelson, and ultimately, like I don't agree with the theoretical distinctions which underpin the idea for the 4 different social paradigms, broadly speaking, which has everything to do with what we're talking about. Yeah, might as well just get into this. And yeah, so sorry this is so messy, but I mean, this is just how it goes. But so this is what it looks like. This is Burrell and Morgan. And so like the whole idea of order and conflict, regulation, and radical change. And so it's the question of, are we trying to figure out how things work and like how things stay stable? And are we trying to like keep things being stable? Or are we trying to create a radical change in how things work? And then you can look at it in terms of, do we have a objective or subjective lens? Like, do we care about how people see things from their perspective, or do we care about, objective trends? And, people are just sort of like instantiations of those, basically. So I would basically disagree that those distinctions of objective and subjective and regulation and social change, I would disagree that those distinctions are foundational. And so, especially with regard to the regulation and social change, this question of if there's a function, what's it a function of? Like, is it a function of like our society, or is it a function of it's like a regulatory principle which is operative like beyond like a person's will or agency in particular. So you could call it sort of like a great filter, or it's, I don't know exactly what to say, but basically in this sense of a functionalist account, it's not about keeping order from a person's point of view. So it would be sort of like, to bring a theological example, something like Noah's flood, right? Noah's flood serves a function for God, and I think it's debated, again, whether or not this really happened. It's also debated, what is that function? Just like wiping away people or golems or whatever. Anyway, but so the point is that even something which is annihilating, which is okay. Sweet. So we are going to be recording. I didn't get to anything that I wanted to talk about, but this is nice. I'm glad I have this webcam because my webcam from before was not doing well. Anyway, but all this is related because, this question of something being like a function for God, or something serving, you could also say a narrative function, because if in the sense that like we're in a story, we're in an arc, and the question is like, what's the optimal resolution of the story? That's where it's nice for everything in the story to serve a function. And it makes the art better for everything to be referred to, and everything gets resolved. All the loose ends are tied up. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it is according to like one person's conception of like this function. So just anyways, yeah. So even I haven't talked that much about theoretical violence, but I would argue that I have been practicing it again in the discussion of abortion before, and also in what I'm doing right now. You could say that I'm sort of reading Zweibelson against Zweibelson. That might be something that I go to in the future. But so the reason why I think playing with abortion, or talking about the Burrell and Morgan, questioning these categories, the reason why I think that counts as theoretical violence relates to this third place where theoretical violence is mentioned in Symbolic Exchange and Death. So Baudrillard's talking about the attempt to reduce the poetic to a meaning. And this goes to what I was saying before, the symbolic, you try to neutralize the symbolic, but it comes to be analyzed in its own terms. So like the question of what is the symbolic there is obviously a big question. I think Baudrillard even talks about in the second place, the symbolic remain terms of simulation. It must be possible to extract them. But then even simulation is a term, would have to be extracted, as well as the term must. And then he just says it must be possible, not that it has to be done. Anyways, but in this part, Baudrillard is saying about theoretical violence that it's the equivalent of the poetic violence which replaces the order of all the atoms in a phrase, of which Nietzsche speaks. So poetic violence which replaces the order of all the atoms of a phrase. So you could probably interpret this in many different ways, but the part which is most obvious to me is that the atoms of a phrase are concepts or words. So if you're replacing the order of the atoms of a phrase, you're taking things out of the relationships that they are usually in, and therefore you're making us question those constituent parts. It could be in poetry, as in when a poet, the words displaces such that grammar strains or is improperly used. Anyway, just like in poetry, you'll like move words around to get the rhythm right or the rhyme or whatever. And similarly, like conceptually, what you're doing is you are taking things out of their usual conceptual relationships to get people to think about them differently. So like that's what I'm doing. Like if I'm using abortion, in a different way, or if I am not just disagreeing with, the implications of, Ben Zweibelson's war philosophy. So in terms of this, like maybe I agree, techno eschatology is interesting. We don't have to call it a war philosophy. We like the necessary organizing logic idea, but, I don't agree with the idea of the free world. And so it's like you are questioning some of the terms in which something is stated. So beyond just disagreeing, beyond just saying like, I'm not evil, you're evil, it's saying like, well, let's think about the concept of evil. And anyway, so I got to wrap this up because I'm going to take a little break before I do my next podcast. But like this is something I feel like Jordan Peterson has been getting clowned for. This whole idea of like, well, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? And I don't really enjoy listening to Jordan Peterson, but this is a place where I would be on their side, at least in the sense that I think, we are continually referred to the problem that our terms contain a lot of preconceived notions that we are more comfortable not challenging, but in the course of events, right? Discursive events, as we like argue with talking points, and then also just like in the world as things come to their conclusions. And many of we all have to like deal with black swan events or things that I don't know, either we didn't expect or now it's the consequences of something are here, and it's like it's not the future anymore. Now it is a concrete reality, and that is now something that we have to respond to in a new way. That is all a place, I think, where the terms that we take for granted, come into question. And I don't think it's just about people wanting it to be that way. Like, I don't think it's just that people want to set identity categories into question for the sake of it. I think it's like this comes up for important reasons. And ultimately, as maybe I'll get into with Rosalind or maybe not, this could also have, theological and eschatological implications in that regard. So basically, like theoretical violence, in terms of the radicalization of hypotheses and sort of, you could call it like the intensification, the raising of the stakes, and the bringing of everything into the game or the discursive environment, I guess, so that more and more, you're dealing with a total discourse or a total, which Anyways, so that's some of why I think theoretical violence is relevant. I gotta go take a quick break. So thank you to anybody who ever watches this. Bye.